In 2012, a 32-year-old teacher named Sarah Mitchell saved for 3 years to buy her first home in a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. She found a 3-bedroom house listed at $158,000. She put in an offer the morning it was listed. By that afternoon, the house was gone. Not to another family, not to a young couple like her, to a limited liability company registered in Delaware that she had never heard of. A company that had purchased 1,400 homes that same month, across the same zip code, with the same wire transfer, from the same New York bank account. Sarah is still renting. The house she tried to buy is now rented out at $2,400 a month by a corporation that has never set foot in her neighborhood, does not know her neighbors' names, and answers to a private equity board that meets in a Manhattan conference room. This is not an isolated story. This is a coordinated, documented, trillion-dollar strategy to end the era of middle-class homeownership in America. And it is working. Welcome. Today we are performing a forensic audit of the American dream theft, how Wall Street firms bought your neighborhood, why your government helped them do it, and what is left for the rest of us. To understand what is happening right now, you have to go back to 2008. The financial crisis didn't just destroy the stock market, it destroyed the housing market. Between 2008 and 2012, an estimated 3.8 million American families lost their homes to foreclosure. Entire neighborhoods in Phoenix, Atlanta, Las Vegas, and Tampa went from owner-occupied communities to block after block of vacant bank-owned properties. It was a genuine catastrophe. And into that catastrophe walked the most sophisticated financial machinery ever assembled. In 2012, the Federal Reserve held interest rates at near zero. Private equity firms like Blackstone, Invitation Homes, and American Homes for Rent, could borrow money for almost nothing. At the exact same moment, the housing market was flooded with distressed properties selling at 40, 50, sometimes 60 cents on the dollar. The math was, as they say on Wall Street, asymmetric, meaning almost impossible to lose. Blackstone alone deployed over $10 billion in a single 18-month window. They were buying homes at the rate of one every 15 minutes, not in one city, nationally, simultaneously. Using proprietary algorithms to identify the highest value zip codes, the best school districts, the neighborhoods most likely to attract renters who could afford premium rent but couldn't yet afford to buy. Let that sink in. One firm, one every 15 minutes, for 18 months. By 2013, institutional investors owned an estimated 200,000 single-family homes across America. By 2022, that number had crossed 500,000. By 2024, depending on who is counting and how, estimates range from 700,000 to over 1 million single-family rental homes controlled by institutional buyers. And they are not slowing down. They are accelerating. But here's the part of the story that gets buried in the financial press. This didn't happen because of free market forces. It happened because the federal government actively helped them do it. In 2012, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, the regulator that oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, launched a program called the REO to Rental Initiative. REO stands for Real Estate Owned. These were the hundreds of thousands of foreclosed homes sitting on the books of government-backed agencies, dragging down the housing market. The government needed to move them, fast. Instead of selling them individually, which would have given families and small investors the opportunity to buy, the FHFA bundled them into bulk packages, thousands of homes sold together in a single transaction to the highest bidder. The only entities capable of absorbing a bulk purchase of 500 homes at once were, by definition, institutional investors with billions in capital and lines of credit backed by Wall Street banks. Individual buyers could not compete. Small landlords could not compete. The transaction structure itself excluded ordinary Americans. The government had essentially created a private auction that only Wall Street could enter. But it doesn't stop there. The tax structure then rewarded them for staying. When a private equity firm acquires single-family homes through a corporate entity, they can depreciate those assets against their income. The same accounting mechanism used for commercial real estate. They can use interest deductions on the billions they borrowed to buy these homes. They can bundle the homes into securities, called single-family rental REITs, and sells shares to pension funds and institutional investors, creating a permanent, liquid financial product out of what was once a neighborhood. And the rents those homes generate? Taxed at capital gains rates, not ordinary income, through careful structuring. Meanwhile, the individual buyer next door who takes out a mortgage to purchase a $350,000 home pays ordinary income tax on his wages to service that mortgage, gets a modest mortgage interest deduction that benefits him less and less as rates rise, and faces an appraisal system where the comparable sales, the comps, used to value his home, are increasingly driven by what investment firms paid for nearby properties. The system was not accidentally tilted. It was specifically engineered in their favor, with their lawyers in the room when the rules were written. Now let's talk about what institutional ownership actually does to the market you are trying to participate in. In 2022 and 2023, the Department of Justice opened an antitrust investigation into RealPage, a software company that provides algorithmic rent-setting tools to large institutional landlords. What investigators found was, in the words of the DOJ complaint, a system where competing landlords were sharing non-public rental price data with a common algorithm that then recommended coordinated rent increases across multiple firms simultaneously. In plain English, the algorithm told every major landlord in a given market to raise rents at the same time, by similar amounts, without those landlords ever having to pick up the phone and talk to each other. The coordination happened inside a computer. The result was documented rent increases of 14.5% in a single year in markets like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Atlanta. Not because demand surged, but because the pricing mechanism was, allegedly, rigged. But the rent manipulation is only half the picture. The other half is what happens to purchase prices. When an institutional buyer enters a market and acquires 2,000 homes in a 12-month period, those purchases become the comparable sales that appraisers use to set values for the entire surrounding market. The prices institutional buyers pay, which often include a premium for bulk acquisition speed and certainty, become the baseline. First-time buyers who are trying to buy a single home with a conventional mortgage that requires a 45-day closing period are now competing against cash offers that can close in 7 days, with no financing contingency, no inspection contingency, and no apology. The National Association of Realtors documented that cash buyers, of which institutional investors are a significant portion, were winning competitive offer situations at a rate 3 times higher than financed buyers in peak market conditions. A teacher with a pre-approved mortgage and 10% down is not competing in the same market. She is competing in a different category that happens to occupy the same listing. And here's the consequence that nobody in the financial press wants to calculate. Every home that a first-time buyer cannot purchase is a home that generates rental income for an institution instead of equity for a family. Over 30 years, the difference between owning a home and renting one is the difference between a paid-off asset worth $400,000 and a net worth of essentially zero from housing. The American dream was not just a metaphor. It was a wealth-building mechanism, and it is being systematically transferred from working families to institutional balance sheets. Let's talk about what it is actually like to be a renter in an institutionally owned home. Because the sales pitch for this system, the PR line from the investment firms, is that professional institutional ownership brings professionalism, efficiency, and investment to the rental market. That single-family rentals are better managed under institutional ownership than under the amateur landlord who lives 2 streets over. The documented reality is different. A 2022 investigation by The Atlantic and a 2023 academic study from Temple University both found that institutional landlords filed eviction notices at dramatically higher rates than small individual landlords. In some markets, 2 to 3 times higher. Invitation Homes, one of the largest institutional single-family landlords in the country, was found to have filed eviction notices on tenants for balances as small as $150, even during the COVID-19 eviction moratorium period, drawing a formal rebuke from the California Attorney General. Maintenance response times at institutional rental homes are documented to be significantly longer than at individually owned rentals. The reason is structural. An individual landlord who owns 2 properties in a neighborhood has an economic incentive to keep good tenants happy. An institutional manager overseeing 800 properties across a metro area, reporting to a KPI dashboard in a corporate office, is optimizing for a different metric. Annual rent increases at institutional properties have been documented at rates significantly above inflation in almost every major market. Unlike individual landlords, who often keep rent stable for long-term tenants out of a combination of relationship and self-interest, institutional landlords are contractually obligated to maximize returns for their investors. Every year, the algorithm recalculates. Every year, the rent goes up. And if you fall behind, the eviction machinery is not a person you can call. It is a legal department backed by institutional capital with no interest in a payment plan. You might be thinking, surely this is a temporary phenomenon. The interest rates went up. The easy money dried up. The institutional buying spree slowed down after 2022. Things will normalize. They will not. And here is why. First, the firms that bought in 2012 through 2021 at historically low interest rates are holding assets with enormous embedded value. They have no incentive to sell. They are collecting rent on properties they purchased at a fraction of current market value, leveraged with debt that was locked in at 3 to 4% interest rates. These homes are not coming back to the market. Second, the next wave of institutional buying is not coming from the same firms. It is coming from pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and foreign institutional capital, entities with 30 and 50-year investment horizons that do not care about a 2-year interest rate cycle. They are buying at current prices because their calculation is not about today's cash flow. It is about owning hard assets, real land, real structures, ahead of the next cycle of currency devaluation. Third, and most consequentially, new construction is not filling the gap. The National Association of Home Builders has documented a structural underbuilding of single-family homes of approximately 3.5 to 4 million units, going back to 2010. The homes that should have been built to house the millennial generation were never built. That supply gap means that even without institutional competition, first-time buyers would be facing a severe shortage. With institutional buyers in the market, the shortage is not being solved. It is being warehoused. The trajectory, if nothing structurally changes, is a permanent two-tier housing market, a ownership class. People who bought before 2015 or who inherited property, and a permanent renter class, who are not renting by choice but by exclusion. Not because they are financially irresponsible, because the market was structured against them before they arrived. So what do? What does the smart money do when the conventional path has been rigged? You do not give up on ownership. You change where you look for it. First, look in the markets. Institutional investors have not yet saturated. Institutional buyers concentrate in specific metros: Atlanta, Phoenix, Tampa, Charlotte, Dallas, Las Vegas. They follow algorithms that target high-growth, high-demand zip codes. That means there are entire categories of markets they are structurally underweight in: smaller cities, secondary markets, rural adjacent communities with strong employment anchors. A $180,000 home in a mid-sized Midwest city with a major employer and a genuine community is a better financial decision than a $450,000 condo in a market that a REIT has already priced for maximum extraction. Second, use the community land trust model. Community land trusts are nonprofit organizations that purchase land and hold it permanently, selling only the structures to individual buyers at below market prices. Because the land is never resold, the homes remain permanently affordable, immune to the speculation premium that institutional buyers create. There are over 250 active CLTs in the United States. They are specifically designed to create the ownership pathway that the conventional market is closing. Look for them, use them. Third, understand the legislative resistance and support it. California, New York, and Minnesota have all introduced or passed legislation restricting or taxing institutional purchases of single-family homes. The HAPPY Act, Housing and Economic Mobility Preservation Act, has been introduced at the federal level, proposing to tax institutional investors who own more than 100 single-family homes at significantly higher rates to discourage aggregation. None of this legislation exists without constituent pressure. Know what is happening in your state. It is the only lever available at scale. Fourth, buy imperfect, buy old, buy the bones. The institutional buyer is optimizing for turnkey, rent-ready product that photographs well for a listing. They do not want the 1970s ranch house with the ugly kitchen and the dated bathrooms. They want the renovated 3-bedroom with granite countertops that rents for top dollar on day one. That means the homes they are not buying are, by definition, homes with work to be done, and homes where an individual buyer willing to put in labor can still compete. Buy the bones. Buy the house with bad cosmetics and good structure in the neighborhood you actually want to live in. The institutional buyer will not be at that table. In 1960, the homeownership rate in the United States was 61.9%. By 2004, it had climbed to 69.2%, the highest ever recorded. That number represented the genuine expansion of the middle class, the post-war prosperity engine, the practical reality of the American dream. Today, it is 65.6% and falling among every age cohort under 44. That decline is not a coincidence. It is not demographic. It is not a lifestyle choice. It is the documented consequence of capital concentration, algorithmic pricing, government-facilitated bulk sales, and a tax structure that rewards institutional accumulation over individual ownership. Sarah Mitchell, the teacher from Atlanta, is still renting. The home she tried to buy in 2012 has appreciated by 140%. She has participated in none of that appreciation. The LLC that outbid her has collected over $200,000 in rent from the tenants who have lived there since. Every dollar of that went to a private equity fund. None of it built a family's equity. That is not a natural market outcome. That is a theft conducted in broad daylight, dressed in the language of efficiency and investment. The first step to fighting it is understanding exactly how it works. Hit subscribe. We cover the financial systems they don't want you to understand every single week. And if this video made you angry, share it, because the only thing these firms fear more than regulation is an informed public that understands what is being taken from them. We'll see you in the next audit.